Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Rich Chester. I am the Secretary of the Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission. I am also a product owner and program director at JPMorgan Chase. So I basically work in the legal department developing smart software that helps us more efficiently interact with outside counsel and other parties and legal vendors. So I essentially have spent more or less 20 years of my career in vendor management specifically. Vendor management and what is essentially document management. So when my first job at Citibank was what I like to say, testing the most boring software imaginable. Back when you actually had to send in checks with your car payments, I actually worked on the software team that worked on the big industrial scanners that would actually index both sides of the check, both sides of the invoice, and make sure that the money for Nissan or the money for waste management got deposited in the right accounts and things like that. So my IT career started essentially in 2006 with that kind of software. So a lot of what I've learned by doing because I'm passionate about technology. I've always been what's called an early adopter of technology. I'm also a big proponent of I like to call higher education, spelled H-I-R-E. Meaning education that gets people hired, not necessarily four-year education. My undergraduate's in English. Now, I got lucky, and now that I work on large language models, that ended up being extremely beneficial. But for the first 15 years of my career, it really wasn't, except for the fact that I could use words better and people around me did not. So that became a little bit of a adjustment period for somebody who, and I'll also mention that I am ADHD, so I'm on the spectrum. So that's why I say if I go too fast, if I say something that doesn't make sense, stop me, because I don't want you to be confused. And I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to be annoyed by somebody asking me to clarify, because from all I know, many of you might be coming to this topic with no previous experience to AI. So I'm going to cover some basic concepts and stuff up front. But again, this is a workshop. The whole purpose is to engage. I want to give you ideas of how to use things, and I want to tell you stories and examples of how I've used some of these products and services in the private sector as well as the public sector to help benefit everybody. This is an incredibly fast-changing landscape of applications, and there is a lot going on in this. Staying up to date on AI is a part-time job in itself. And you can only go so deep and so technical, because what the best model is for search, or the best model today for image generation or video generation, somebody releases a code release tomorrow, it might go from being the best to the absolute worst. It might go from being the best to mediocre, or it might go from being the best to slightly less than best, but then it ends up costing you a third of it. So a lot of these applications change, they evolve. So a little bit more about me, just because I'd like to be able to give people context of why I'm here. So why am I here? I'm currently the vice chair of the AI training subcommittee for the AI Commission. And I was tasked with developing a training curriculum for the public. So if I say anything today that interests you and you would like to potentially further your knowledge, I do have free Grow with Google licenses that I can award out. So you can do certifications and things like that. You can just shoot me an email, and then I can add you on Coursera, and you can go in and take that. That's something that I'm doing as part of the AI Commission. And again, I have 500 licenses, so if you're interested in AI and Google data analysis, it's not everything on Coursera, but it's a lot. And again, these are things that directly transfer over to things that companies need to. In addition, I also work with your middle and high school students. So I'm on the Governor's Council for Career and Technology Education. So I'm going into the schools, I'm talking to your CTE teachers, your plumbing, electrician, programming, electrical engineering, agriculture, making sure they get the money that they're supposed to be getting, and making sure they have the resources they need to teach their classes. So again, I'm coming at this from a career and technology education. I've spent my career in automation, so I consider it my personal responsibility to help other people as well as the next generation towards careers that are at least resistant to automation, if not automation proof. And the way that people talk about these tools is very aspirational. Once you get in and you actually use these tools every day, you'll find that you might be spending as much time with the AI tool as you did using a manual tool. And you need to leave it up to yourself as to make the decision as to what is a better use of your time. But unfortunately, the only way you figure that out is you using these tools. Again, we're going to be focusing mostly on practical demonstration. So I got feedback from the last session that I went a little bit too deep into some of the concepts and didn't show enough. So I'm going to focus a little bit more in this session on demo. I'm going to be demoing at least 4 tools today. If we get through more, I'll get through, hopefully get through more, but we're going to be showing music generation tools as well as video and gaming world generation tools. Again, as we go through, I'm going to kind of open up, give you some ways to think about this. I'm going to give you some metaphors so that you can relate to some of the things that we're talking about, because the size and scale of energy and computing power that's required to do some of the things I'm going to show you today, there are some debates that still need to happen around that. I am not one of those proponents of build as many data centers as possible, as quickly as possible. If I have 4 rules when it comes to this, and I just go ahead and say this outright. My 4 rules are: I don't want to smell it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to taste it, and I don't want my bill to change. You do those 4 things, you can put it in my backyard. But those are 4 simple rules that everybody should be looking at for data centers. You can't talk about these type of engines without talking about the energy that's consumed in making them. And right now, many of these companies are under fire for figuring out how to make the average person benefit from it while sucking up a ton of energy and water doing it. There are better ways to build data centers, and it simply requires us thinking a little bit harder and the people behind this spending a little bit more money. But again, you should always question when someone's going to put a data center in your community and what's powering it. So I just want to say that to get that debate right off the bat. So anybody comes to this thinking that this is a way to backdoor a data center in, no. And I will say that to every press in Delaware, not just, and I've said it to the commission as well. We have 3 more sessions coming up. We're going to be doing so the next one's going to focus on AI agents. So we're going to talk, I'm going to build a couple different agents about how to scrape the internet, how to make life easier, how to do some automated calculations on some Excel sheets and things like that. I'm also going to show how to build customer service, so you could maybe create your own customer service line using an AI bot to actually receive the messages and do auto prompts. I'm going to show you how you can do that in Google Agent. We're also going to do another one focused on small business. Again, it's going to be more practical. How can you get an AI subscription and make it work for your small business tomorrow? Again, most of the stuff that we're talking about today is, again, aspirational. It's innovative. It's going to be about trying to show you what's available so that we can, get people interested and let AI know that it's not as terrifying as a lot of people think it is, and that you don't need a PhD in data scientist, or you don't need to work for Google or OpenAI to get a lot out of these tools and have them benefit. And then the last one we're going to be doing is in May. When you fill out that feedback sheet, it will ask you if you'd like other subjects, and also if you'd like me to enter in guests. We are trying to get more local guests, like in the agents. We're going to have someone come in and talk about the regulatory sandbox that they're building for the Department of Education and how they're going to test all the AI tools before they let your kids' data be fed into it and things like that. So we're going to talk about that. And then the last one is, like I said, ethics, privacy, and personalization. So this is going to be focused on really kind of talking about the ethics, like what kind of data you're actually giving up when you click through all of those I accept, and what you can and can't do. But then also talking about the benefits where you may want to turn on some of those settings depending on what you want to use AI for. Like if you're somebody that really hates writing emails, connecting AI, doing a Google Pro account might be up your alley, because then you can do one-click generation of emails. Hey, go find the conversation that I had with such and such. You know what I mean? Sorry about that. And again, we need your feedback. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of one-on-one so we all get on the same page. So when I'm talking about this technology, these terms, we all can speak the same language. AI helps to look at it as a giant umbrella, okay? So it's really a field of science, field of research, dedicated to making machines capable of performing tasks that normally require human intelligence. That is, AI is the what. It's what you're using. So when I talk about Gen AI, I'm usually referring to the tool, the thing you see, the thing you touch, the thing you interface with. The model is something different. Now, each one of these features underlining here, machine learning, natural language processing, process automation, generative AI, computer vision, deep learning, they're all aspects of artificial intelligence that more or less intermingle with things like large language models, generative AI. And as a high level, machine learning is basically feeding a whole bunch of data into a machine and either letting it predict what's right and what's wrong, letting it categorize stuff by itself, or you physically going in and categorizing it yourself and then having the machine try to do what you just did. Those are all different types of machine learning. There's complicated names for them, like structured machine learning, unstructured machine learning, supervised learning, things like that. But that's essentially what they are. It's how you feed data into a system. Deep learning, a biggest example of deep learning is the For You page on TikTok. So how it is constantly looking at what you looked at, but it's not just looking at, for example, what your likes and dislikes are. It's actually recording the amount of time your eye stays focused on that particular video. I'm kind of known for referring to TikTok's algorithm as completely ruthless. It does not care what type of engagement it gets, as long as it gets repeat engagement. If you are somebody that watches a lot of political stuff, you are going to be reinforced with a lot of political stuff to make you mad. If the same thing, your likes and your dislikes, your favorites, what you share, all of that feeds into what gets shown to you. And that's what deep learning is. Same thing with the Netflix algorithms and how it recommends movies. It's looking at the movie you watch, the movies you started to watch but didn't finish, the TV shows you started but didn't finish, the ones that you've watched 3, 4, 5 times all the way through. All of those things are aspects of data that come into deep learning. Natural language processing, when you talk to Siri, that's NLP. When you talk to your Amazon Echo, that's NLP. When you are typing text and have it spit back voice, anytime you are converting voice to text or you're looking at converting text to voice, that's natural language processing. When you type in a prompt to ChatGPT, that is also natural language processing because you're sending a command in English in text and you're asking it to do something. If it didn't understand the English language, it wouldn't be able to actually respond and give you something you need. It's one of the reasons why, despite AI being prolific in China, a lot of AIs are trained on English language systems. Because unlike Chinese characters, which can have multiple meanings depending on the situation, it is hard for computers to imply context and situation. Whereas English in a lot of ways is a much more complicated language, it is also a very finite language in that there's specific words to describe almost everything. In Chinese, it can be very, very different. So that's one of the things that I've learned about going through this is a lot of Chinese developers code on English language systems. Because again, you don't have to then retrain something that you trained in Chinese again on English. It's much easier to do the opposite and go from English to Chinese to other languages because it's structured, and the accuracy is going to differ depending on that. And then robotics is when an AI enters the physical realm and you can interact with it. A Roomba is technically an AI robot machine. In a lot of ways, your Apple TV and your Amazon Echo are too, because they're not just waiting for a prompt, they're usually measuring motion in front of it. Like for example, if you don't get up for a while or you don't move, your Apple TV will prompt you, do you want to continue watching this? Because it thinks you might be asleep, things like that. So again, that's all robotics as well as things like computer vision and well. Does that all make sense? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the anatomy of digital worlds. So I like using this metaphor when I talk about AI because a lot of times you just hear talking heads on television use the word AI interchangeably with things, and it's a really quick indicator that they don't know what they're talking about. So when I refer to generative AI, I am referring to the tool, the interface. And in this case, since we're talking about digital worlds today, I would call it the reality fabricator machine. What you, the individual, are interacting with to produce something. Now, a good way to look at this is a car. So the generative AI is the actual car itself, whereas the model is the engine. Now, one of the things that's happening in AI right now is you have what's called AI aggregators, which are applications like Perplexity, for example, that don't give you access to just ChatGPT or Gemini, they give you access to 7 different models. So basically, imagine having a car, and when you hit drive, you can select whether you want to use the 4-cylinder or you want to use the V12. Models are very much the same way. Even within like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, you might have Gemini, and then underneath that might be 10, 15 different versions of that. And I'm not joking. Like some might be designed to be very lean so they use very little energy. Some are designed so that they optimize for images. Some are designed for the medical field and optimized based on that. So whatever training data you use to train that model, it's just like applying code, or whenever you're committing code or building a website, you're creating a new version of that because you're giving it new information. So all of its context, all of its indexes have changed. So when I talk about models, think about the engine in a car. So when I talk about Google VO, when I talk about Flow, when I talk about Genie, these are all generative AI tools. I will talk about the underlying models that each one of them use to convert what you enter in text into building whatever it's going to build. But as a general rule, the model is the brain, the engine, and then the fuel. This is the part that nobody likes to talk about on TV, but it's really important for community people to understand. When you ask ChatGPT to a question like, convert this time to another time, something you would ask Google for, that's a pretty simple thing for it to do. It's been indexed, it doesn't have to go look at anything, it doesn't have to think about it, it just goes, indexes it, finds it, it's done. That might take a half a token or 1 token. Generating an image, let's say I write a 1-paragraph long prompt that I want it to generate an image relevant to a Facebook post that I want to make about how important it is for kids to be engaged in creative problem solving and hands-on experimentation. I've just went from 1 token to 12 to maybe 20 to 25. Now, imagine I want to make a 10-second video with the same thing. It's going to take more gas to build that. A V12 burns more gas than a 4-cylinder car. So that's when you're talking about these models and people are talking about capability versus scaling, they're talking about how can you get the most out of your gas. That is why, like a lot of the tools that I'm going to show you today are things that should be accessible to the average person, but right now are behind a paywall. But it's important for you to see what influencers have, what people in IT in Silicon Valley have because they work for Google or one of their subsidiaries, and what your kids might be competing against when they go out and they do different projects like for DECA or HOSA or BPA or any of these student clubs. It is not against the rules to use AI to help you build something. Even in my world today, we use AI to oversee code, to check deployments, to make sure things don't blow up when we make a code change. There are safeguards that are put in place. Now you need the infrastructure and all of that to maintain that. But it's important to talk about this aspect of fuel when you talk about this, because I'm going to show you some basic stuff today. But I don't want to downplay the fact that within the time of what I'm showing you, there is a quantity of water that's been used. There is a quantity of energy that's been used. And when we talk about forcing these companies to do more, you want something to run on your iPhone that doesn't require water, that can run off the battery power of your iPhone. And what you're seeing is, these companies you hear like, all of a sudden Apple doesn't want to use OpenAI. They want to use Gemini for Siri and Apple Intelligence. Why? Smaller, uses less energy, makes your battery drain slower, because that's what consumers want. Whereas ChatGPT obliterated people's battery life. So if you have not disabled Apple Intelligence on your phone and you are wondering why you have no battery life, that would be why. I personally disable that. I disable the automatic voice command so that I have to hit a button to talk to it. All of that is pulling energy. All of that is pulling resources, either from your phone or something in the cloud. Does that make sense? Okay. Is this too high level or am I going too deep? Is this just right? Okay, cool. Now, again, tokens are the fuel of creation. So again, like AI and music, for example, we're going to create some music here in a little bit. You're all going to throw out suggestions, kind of like ad libs, and we're going to make music. But again, building a song takes a certain amount of energy. Building a video takes a certain amount of energy. Building a video with audio that sync together takes another chunk of energy. So when these things can do all of this at one time, as long as it's not 4 times the energy consumption, it's progress. Again, I'm trying to explain this in ways so that you understand when someone says, my model's great, my model's awesome. You can understand, well, the question is, well, how much energy are you using? How many tokens did you take to create that 10-second video? Because when you look at this, these are the different tiers that Google has. Gemini, Gemini Pro, Gemini Ultra, and Gemini Enterprise. For the purposes of this in the workshop, I did a 3-month trial of Google Ultra, which is what's gotten access to all these tools today. It is normally $250 a month. But it's 1 million tokens, or 10 million tokens per month. So basically, if I were to try to use Genie or Flow or any of these video or world generation tools, I wouldn't even be able to finish thinking about whether it could do the query. It would just crap out. When you go to the 128K version, it might get the first 2-3 seconds of the video, might not do anything. And then you shot your entire wad for the month. This is, again, why you need to care about token usage, why you need to care about model optimization. And you will freak IT people out as an average citizen if you ask these questions, because most of them don't know. Because, again, we go back to Jurassic Park, where people start to think too much about whether or not they could. They stop to think whether or not they should, or they try to build it a different way. And you're starting to see the market do that. That's why models like Anthropic's Claude is being adopted everywhere, because it's lean. It doesn't take a lot of server space, and it doesn't take a lot of energy to run it. And you can deploy it on all of your code deployment tools. Like, you can literally clone it without really increasing your energy burn. So again, that's why this matters. You're not just typing a prompt, you're managing a resource. If you don't take anything away from this for AI and gaming, that's what you need to manage. Because if you want to use it for your business, and your business is creating videos, and you're making money based on how many hits each one of those videos go, all of a sudden that $250 subscription doesn't look that expensive. Do you see what I mean? It's important to understand that a lot of the influencers, a lot of these paid promoters are given access to this stuff for free. That's why I want to show people this, so when you're going and you're saying, hey, well, you work in IT, why can't you do this? Or, hey, this girl that I follow on Instagram does the coolest things. Okay, well, she's got 1 million followers and she's sponsored by Google or OpenAI or one of them. And then I have to ask the really awkward question of, how do you know it's a real person? Again, it's important to understand this, because this is a conversation about AI that we rarely have. So when people are talking about building data centers, if you get even an incremental 25% increase in durability or a 25% decrease in temperature, we won't need hyperscale data centers anymore. Because everyone will want to build their own and not subcontract out to Google or OpenAI or something like that, because they can build it in their backyard. Okay. Now, before we jump in and we start playing with the tools, I'm going to talk about hallucinations. Okay? Hallucinations, in short, are whenever the AI gets it wrong. Okay? Now, it can get it wrong for a bunch of reasons. Like you've seen, I'm sure, AI slop, where there's all kinds of gobbledygook in the background, or it creates some kind of nightmare fuel. I will show you something that I created earlier regarding the Muppets that's just absolutely terrifying, because it tried not to do copyright infringement and just created pure nightmare fuel. Other things are where occasionally it will make up sources. Like if you ask it to do research and you don't tell it to check, it will quote a website, make up an article. The website exists, but there's no actual article to that on the website. It might just be a link to like Center of Disease Control, but no actual article itself. So, and a lot of law firms are getting dinged by this now. It's one of the reasons why me and my company, we make law firms disclose when they use AI for deliverables. Because if they use AI for one of our deliverables, we then have to ask, well, did you bring it in-house, or did you just put all of our personal data on a third party so Google can read it? These are, again, hard questions why people have to ask. But AI hallucinations happen. It can happen for a variety of reasons: lack of constraints, bad data retrieval, training data limitations, all that stuff. How to spot a hallucination: again, nonsensical connections, fabricated sources, implausibility, vague answers. Sometimes it just gets stuff wrong. Like, I've tried to ask it questions about quotes from like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the 90s, and it gives me quotes, but I say that's wrong, that's wrong. And then after about 4 or 5 tries, I get to the right episode and the right quote that I actually want. But it actually gave me 7 different versions of that quote that were wrong. So what it did was it went and scraped like wall posts and things like that instead of actually going to a source that had like an episode transcript. So it guesses. Sometimes guess is right, sometimes the guess is wrong. So, not to get all meta, but I created an image about hallucinations with hallucinations. Okay, so when we create video and stuff as we go through, you can point out some of the things that I've created in there. So like you can see in here, it's spelled factually wrong, it's spelled hallucination wrong, it's spelled it, and then we have what I like to call word salad. So these like graphics right here, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that is. See what I mean? All of those are hallucinations. It's why, you know, with AI, while you can get 70% of your work done in 7 seconds, you really need to put 70% of it into reviewing the final product. Because these kind of things right there, people have knee-jerk reactions when you put stuff like this in a presentation. Because they're going to look and be like, okay, you didn't care enough about me to get the right image, so you just created something random and threw it up there. So, again, we talked about, I want to get to the demo stuff quickly. So, prompt engineering. So you'll hear me say prompt engineering, context engineering. It's how do you query the AI or the tool to get what you want. So sometimes it's going to be uploading a video and saying trim this. It might be uploading a set of images and saying, hey, create a video for this using these handful of images and doing it that way. At the end of the day, prompts, and if you're using the free versions of this, like the reason I have 6 different AI apps on my phone is because I only pay for one of them. The other 5 of them I like to compare to see what different versions of it. Especially if I get like copyright blocks, or I ask it to write a biography about a person who is me, and it won't do it because it says I'm not allowed to create images about actual people. But then if I tell it to do it again, it just doesn't. Is that really safeguards? Is that really guardrails? Things like that. But it's important to keep this in mind, because what you'll learn is you'll do things at work. Your brain will start to figure out patterns, figure out ways to get what you want in the least number of tries. What working with AI becomes, it's a very iterative process. I'll show you up front some of the prompts that I use, some of the ways that I'll use different models. Like for example, I'm going to show you how to create a song with an AI, but we're going to use a different tool to actually write the song. And then we're going to go into another tool, put the song in, and then have it add music and things like that. So speaking of that, we're going to talk about Loudly. Has anybody here ever heard of Loudly before? Okay, one of you. So Loudly is essentially a musical workbench. So it's a modular studio that has text-to-music generation. It has stem splitters, so if you're like my buddy over here listening to my audio, you can actually split your audio tracks away from your video. If you wanted to, let's say, have a video of, you know, maybe your kid doing a voiceover for a project, you could snatch the audio out of that as an audio file and then put it over top of something else. So these are, and again, this is one of the least expensive tools. So I think it's something like $49.95 for the entire year for use for this. So, and we'll go ahead and I'll bring that up and I can show that now. How was that? Was that a good amount of background, too much background? Am I boring people? Okay, just making sure. Am I telling you things you've never heard before? Okay. At least that's positive. Actually, let's just mirror now. Okay. So remember how I told you guys models, okay? This app calls them modes, okay? Still the same concept. Still an engine, still a model, but they call it a mode. They've got two modes, one for to quick instrumental tasks for everyday creation, and another one to create high fidelity music and vocals. So we'll try the smaller one first. So somebody throw out a prompt. What do we want to create an instrumental for? Okay. Create a dramatic sci-fi introduction music, reminiscent, let's just say similar to Star Trek or Doctor Who. Okay? I love security, but and believe it or not, I actually get somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 10 spam messaging, email, phishing attempts, and text message every day. The more your name appears in stuff related to the state of Delaware, the more people seem to target you for some reason. Okay. Okay, so it's going to go ahead. Now again, it's taking longer because it uses more resources. Simple text generation things where it's not creating something from nothing, take less tokens, take less time. Okay, so we'll play this one. I can't turn it up on here past where it is. It doesn't let me. Do not see a remote. Watch me regret turning the volume up that high when I go to play a YouTube video. Okay, so I apologize in advance if I blow out anybody's eardrums. Okay, so that's the first one I created. This is the next one I created. See? Yeah, I just gave kind of a vibe, I guess, for each one. Definitely reminds me of Doctor Who. Now you can see over here it's got options where I can distribute the track, save it, I can add it to my library. I can download the audio track as a file if I want and send it to my buddy, let him listen to it on his iPhone, see if he likes it. Let's try and do another one. Let's do this one. So you can see it's basically 3 variations on the same kind of concept, okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and respond it. So let's see what it does. Slightly electronic with heavy bass. See what happens. So you can see, just like it does in ChatGPT, I'm creating a dialogue, I'm creating an interface with it, so it's saving what I did beforehand when I do it again. The one thing to remember about this, so make sure if you want to retain any of this stuff, make sure you sign in with your Google account beforehand, because the moment you refresh a page, it usually clears all the dialog boxes. So if you're trying to suddenly save something, it always helps to try out one of these tools. And if you're worried about sharing your data, just create a garbage Gmail address that you use for all of it. I have one email address specifically just for that. So if I want to do trials, if I'm worried about giving my email address away, I can use that one instead. Okay, let's see what it does now. So did it follow the prompt or did it not follow the prompt? So it hallucinated a little bit. And see, unfortunately, this is one of the things that I've noticed about doing this, because I can be both very picky and very not picky about stuff depending on what type of mood I'm in. And I'll go through this and I'll create 7 versions and then go back and use the first one I did because it was the best one that it did. So as I go through and I refine it, it doesn't understand what I'm trying to do. Now, let's get a little. I'm going to have it. So this is Google. I'll switch it to Google Gemini. So what I'm going to ask it to do, what do you guys want to write a song about?
Write a love song?
Sure. PG though, since this is being recorded. Okay, write a love song about what? Okay. Okay, can we do something else besides dolphins? Because I have a feeling that I'm going to get words on that if someone watches that. Love song about 2
robots.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Now, because I have Google Ultra, it went ahead and bypassed. I just told it to write a song. It's invoking their version of Loudly to create actual music. When what I probably should have said was, write the lyrics to a love song about 2 robots.
My core programming starts to fade. A new subroutine has been made.
So in this case, I would say they jumped the gun, and they probably should have let me review the text of the lyrics first instead of burn this. So let's try this again. It says, write a love song about 2 robots, and instead I'm going to say, write just lyrics. With a early 2000 rhetoric. No, I'm going to copy and paste what I just did. Create a early 2000s pop song. I'm just warning you, this is probably going to be mega cringe, but we'll see what happens. This one probably going to take a little bit long because I gave it more inputs. I gave it actual audio. Now, it depends on how optimized the model, because in one sense, that might be actually better because it doesn't have to make it up. It can just use the words that I've given it. But in another sense, it's got to now find music to actually match up with that, with the actual tempo of those words. So we'll see what happens. Okay, actually, I need to switch models and do that again. Okay, so why did it do that? It didn't do that because I'm still using the model for just creating instrumental tracks. I want to use this model instead. It's a whole iterative process, trial and error thing starting to make sense? Why they want you to spend a lot of money on their products so that they can continue to play with stuff like this, while at the same time not having actual promotional benefit to society. Like, that's the thing about these tools. They're really great, but it comes to why are you building it? What's going to use it? Who's going to benefit from it? Because you got to train people to use these tools. And I don't know about you, but writing and creating music this way is a completely different mental way of thinking of stuff. Like having the lyrics, figuring out what you want the vibe to be, not just sitting with an instrument and playing. Like, you don't have that organic process. Just because you can create something fast doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's useful, and doesn't mean it's actually going to be engaging to your audience. All right, let's see what it does. Remember, I warned you about cringe. Sounds like it could be on K-pop Demon Hunters. Not bad.
I have a question. I don't want to get like straight to the topic. If it's something you're gonna get to later, or like if you don't know. So I saw, like you said, it can distribute and things like that. I guess like my question is in regards to like the ethics of that and like kind of how that works. Because like I imagine like some AI models, like you said, try to avoid copyright and things like that. So like, how is this building it? Like, is it pulling from different artists?
Well, in this particular, and one of the reasons why I picked Loudly, okay? There are some tools that are owned by big corporations that you're creating and you're paying not just for the tool, but you're paying for all the infrastructure required to run it. And there's other ones like Loudly that actually pays artists to create samples and put stuff into their data set. So that's one of the reasons why I picked this specific one, because they actually have a team of artists. They have people that can actually submit stuff, the stuff that they would throw away in recording sessions. They can actually submit that to Loudly to their data set and be comped for it. That's the right way to compensate artists for data set versus just simply just, you know, getting an iPhone account, downloading everything, recording it into the system, and doing it that way. This way, at least artists gets compensated for what they're doing. It's one of the reasons why I liked this particular company versus some of the other. Now, Google has their own version, but you saw it was so excited that it could create music that it didn't bother to do what I really wanted it to do first. So, but again, it's trying to guess what I want and give me that in the least number of tries. And as a result, you'll end up where it will actually get stuff wrong a lot too. And again, you know, you see style in here. You know, let's see what the other one did, what the other version was. That would be hallucination. It literally just took the whole text of the thing and ignored the rest of it. again, it's designed to make music. It's not necessarily, you know, and again, like you have down here with this particular model, I have the option of adding audio to the model. Like I can record something, I could sing a bar, and then it can just layer the music underneath it. So if you've got someone who really wants to be the next pop star, but they can't afford their own recording session, give them a Loudly subscription for Christmas. Let them record it, and then they can mix their own music. Again, that's way AI can empower people to actually do really cool things. Okay, any questions about music generation before I jump on? Go ahead.
Are you familiar with Suno? Have you heard of that one as well?
I've heard of it, yeah.
I have a friend who uses it. I personally, I stayed off of it because I wasn't too sure about it because I'm always iffy on AI itself. That was just one I was curious if it was going to be brought up today. But that's just.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools that I can use, so I'm just trying to give you guys what I could say would be the most cutting edge ones that I could get for day. And I too have a mortgage and things like that and can't afford to spend thousands of dollars every month on these. So again, I'm just trying to give you exposure to this. But pseudos, like I'm going to show that's actually on my list at the end. I have a list of all, not just paid ones, but free ones, open source ones that I'll let you guys take a picture of as we go through. How are we doing on time? Oh shit. Oh, edit that out. Okay, so we'll jump back to look at, okay. If anyone needs to leave right at 1:15, you are welcome to go ahead and leave. I will not be offended, but I'll keep going if people want me to keep going, if that's okay. Okay, so we talked about, so real quick, some of the other models. So there's also things like image generation models. So Nano Banana, whenever it comes up, when you ask Google to create something, that's their image generation model. On OpenAI, it's called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E is one of them. Basically, whenever you have one of these apps, it usually has multiple models behind it, and it basically calls whatever model it thinks is most appropriate for the task. Now, next I'm going to show you real quick, I'm going to show you Google VO. So in this case, Google VO is actually the model itself. So the model is VO3, and then the tool that I'm going to show you is Flow. How many people in here have used an Adobe product, like Photoshop or Premiere? Okay. When I go in and I show you what Flow looks like, you're going to be really reminiscent of that. So Flow, and I'm going to show you something that I actually created. So before I read all the feedback to the last one, so again, this is a suite of Google products. I was going to do a section of this on a concept called photogrammetry. Anybody ever heard of that word before? If anybody in here play horror video games or action shooter video games, okay? Resident Evil, what they do is photogrammetry is where they create a real life equivalent of whatever it is. They scan it with a 3D model, and then they're able to then manipulate that inside the system. So photogrammetry is taking pictures from all angles, every angle, to create a digital representation of something. So what I did was I used this, and basically the way it is, it's a text prompt, just like I showed you before. It has essentially two modes, and then I created.
Photogrammetry allows us to scan real-life locations and objects, bringing an unprecedented level of realism to virtual worlds. Photogrammetry allows us to scan real-life locations and objects, bringing an unprecedented
I gave it the definition of photogrammetry, and I said create a documentary-style clip explaining what the concept is, showing a digital world. Now, I tried to transition to the next scene. So create a transition showing a structure and then showing a wireframe version of it. Then I tried this.
As we slow down, watch closely as the world around us shifts from the cinematic to the synthetic. As we slow down.
Now, if you look at this one.
Slow down. The reality you knew is fading. Prepare for immersion into the digital realm.
Not really that great help. Not really that helpful.
The reality you knew is fading.
But if you're somebody who can come up with an entire script in your head, an entire music video, an entire marketing clip, you can go scene by scene and create it with this.
photography. Every
Yeah, and again, what I can do is basically what I've created in here is I've created a repository of different clips that I can use to put together. So I can use these. So this is their scene builder view. Now separately, if I wanted to, I could go and I could create a new project. So you can see here. Sorry. So this is a view that shows all the scenes, and then if I go over to scene builder, it looks like a film strip. If you've ever used iMovie, it very much creates the same kind of thing. So what it did was it's taken all those clips and looped them together, and I can literally edit them, trim them. I could probably, if I wanted to, I could click plus and save this frame as an asset and put it in my library, or I could save the entire thing as an asset, or if I wanted to, I could create, you know, a jump to where it's going to jump to another clip. The same, what I like about Google is Google, much like what Apple was like in the early 2000s, is very much focused on usability and how it can, and the user experience and how it works to someone who's never looked at any of these systems. Now I mentioned iMovie, Photoshop, all of that. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room, based on the nods that I've gotten today, could probably figure out how to use this and build something decent in about maybe an hour, maybe less, depending on, you know, what your standards are, and could actually create something that's useful. Let's say, for example, you're a restaurant and you're doing a special dish for tonight. Take a picture of it, create a promotional video, but when you do the upload, add in logos of your restaurant, pictures of the motif, or maybe just take a 10-second video of someone serving somebody so you have something you can use as a substitute. Everything I just mentioned is intellectual property you created. All you're doing is using this the same way a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician would use a toolbox. It's the exact same thing. So when you go through and you see these, you can create things really, really quickly. Now you could go to Gemini if you want and say, write a, you know, create a 10-second clip explaining what photogrammetry is. Now this one, I'm actually on Pro, so it may not do it. So you saw how fast it did it when I logged into my other Google account, and how slow it is just to create this one, you know, this very small video is going to take 1 to 2 minutes just on this. That's also what you pay for. The analogy I like to say about this is you don't need a Porsche Cayenne to go grocery shopping. It's really nice, but you really just need 2 legs and a bag. It's how fast do you want to get there, how much do you want to carry, and how good do you want the experience to be. And that's really what it comes down to. Now if I go in it, now if I go over to this and I say, so let's say an Aerial America type video of Wilmington. Aerial America is a show on the Smithsonian History Channel where it's basically a drone and it's set to nice calming music. It's really great to fall asleep to. But it basically goes through all the different states and, you know, landmarks and things like that. So it's going to create it here at the end. But again, you're seeing how much faster this is versus me doing it the other way. Now it did finish it, so let's just...
By capturing an object from multiple angles, photogrammetry stitches these images together, generating a precise point cloud and textured mesh. By capturing an object from multiple angles, photogrammetry...
Now you'll also notice, because I just played you my other clip, it used very similar text. So what this did was it looked at other things that had played and probably pulled it from that. Or it's got a stock, or basically what it does is someone created some content and this text was okay and they saved it, so I'm going to reuse that as a suggestion for when someone does something similar. Again, the key thing is it's prediction. Sometimes it does a really good prediction, you're like, wow, it's sentient. And other times you're like, wow, this thing's dumb. So I'll go back in here.
Photogrammetry
Now you
allows
know
us
what
to
it did,
scan
right?
real-life
It took the
locations
map
and
of Delaware
objects,
and then
bringing an
transposed that into
unprecedented level of
topography.
realism to
Again,
virtual-
hallucination, not something I would really want to use. So you can see kind of the shape of Delaware in there. Like, I don't know what it did, but that's definitely not a screenshot of what Wilmington looks like. So again, and that's why people in the state, like for example, on the AI Commission, when I'm asked about stuff, they're looking to pass a bill to make it illegal for an AI to pose as a human being. So unless they say AI in parentheses next to it, if it pretends that it's Joe or Sally or whoever else, and it's not really that, they can get fined for it. That's what it should be. They can't claim that costs are going up if they're not actually having human beings doing stuff. And they're just relying on an AI client that's been trained off one company's data to do everything that they want to do. It's very challenging with that. The last thing that I want to kind of show real quick, hopefully I have time, is, and again, this is one of those things where it's very good in terms of showing people the power of some of these tools. So Project Genie is their world creation tool. So what it allows you to do is with a single text prompt, or if you upload like pictures of, let's say, library, you can actually create a virtual world. So in this case, paper airplane. You can actually create a virtual world, and this is actually playable. So if I wanted to, I could go in and I can say, now I can select third person or first person. So obviously first person would be like a first person shooter type game. If I select this, it would be a third person, so an over the shoulder kind of cam. So what it will do is it's going to create a sketch first, and that sketch of what it looks like. Okay. Now with this, it's basic. You can only use a keyboard for movement, so it's basically AWSD and then using the directional pads and then space to jump. But I've created a digital world that is interactive. Yeah, I just said make a dog that looks like Snoopy. So I'm guessing they're assuming that that's the only reason a dog would be allowed in the library is if it was a service dog, so that's probably why. Yeah, so I mean, you can see some of the hallucinations in the background.
That's interesting. This is all part of like Google.
Yeah, this is part of Google's Ultra subscription. And again, it's really cool because if you're somebody who is creating virtual worlds, and some of these things are actually accessible to teachers and educators. But the thing that I want to point out is I didn't just use tokens to build it. Every click burns fuel, every single one. So these kind of things are really cool to look at, but you need to be able to scale them down so that they can run on a computer, so they don't need so much computing power. Now you could scale the graphics down and limit it to make it look like Roblox or make it look like Fortnite, something similar, same kind of graphics thing. You can still do a lot creativity-wise, but minimize the variables, so you could allow the kids to actually build more with this. I saw this and I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then I suddenly realized why that screenshot I showed you earlier that had 10 million tokens and why it needed 10 million tokens. Because turns out I burned like 10,000 tokens in the past 3 minutes just to do this. So it's important to understand this is why we need information on how much it costs to run certain things. We need to know what's being used for industrial application versus what's being used for research and development. And that's what a lot of companies are figuring out. This stuff is really cool, but how am I going to use this if I'm in finance and banking? How am I going to use this if I own a small business? Now, if you're someone who, as a young person, wants to get into this, wants to build worlds, it's a great way because it teaches you to think about atmosphere, environment, character, texture, lighting, all the things that they might not have the patience for in class. But they're going to notice it because they're going to be playing it, they're going to experience it, and it's not going to be the same thing. And they're going to be like, how do I get to that? Another really awesome tool is lovable.dev. It is a single text creation for entire websites and applications. You can literally pay money and have it deployed and make it available in the App Store. Again, if you have the patience and you have an idea, these things can empower you to really build it. My version of this for the state of Delaware is having us have our own AI aggregator app and then giving it to all K through 12 teachers and all kids 8th grade and higher. Because it also offers kids a consequence-free way of asking questions, where they don't need to look stupid in front of their friends, where they don't need to be worried about something they think is really cool might be dumb. They can test drive the ideas first. You might think you have a great voice. Someone says, oh, you've got a great voice, but you just know how to sing other people's stuff. Write your own thing. And then what you'll find out is you'll build community by showing it to people, by getting feedback on it. You'll go back in and you'll fix it and things like that. I could build an entire PowerPoint with Gemini. I don't, because I like going through each slide. I like creating individual content for each thing, because at the end of the day, I've got topics that I want you to understand and things that I think are interesting and cool. And that's essentially why I'm here, is to show this kind of stuff for everybody. Because again, AI, the more people learn about it, the better off they're going to be long term. So So again, I promised you the other thing I want to show is this, okay? Has anybody ever heard of Seed Dance? This was released literally a week ago, okay? And this is what it does. Fully AI generated when you don't care about intellectual property. Look at it. That would cost millions of dollars for that one scene. It's really interesting. There's a book series and a movie called Ready Player One. Read the book if you get a chance, especially the audiobook version, because Will Wheaton is the narrator, okay? It talks about a world where one company buys the IP for everything and anyone can create whatever fan fiction they want. So if you don't like the way The Sopranos ended, you can make a new ending scene. If you felt that your favorite TV show didn't get its final season the way it should have, you can remake the last one, episode by episode. It's an interesting concept, but when we're 100 years away from these intellectual products, how much more money should these companies be allowed to make off people that are dead? That's like you see all those horror movies about Mick Steamboat Willie and Winnie the Pooh and all of that, because now those things are aged out of IP. You can only do it for 70 years. You can't do it in perpetuity. It's going to become more and more important with this kind of stuff. And then here's another one. So this is the test footage that they actually released. It's probably not going to play. But it's amazing what this is doing. And what's interesting about ByteDance is they're taking a different approach than Google. So while Google's focusing on user experience and cinematic quality, ByteDance is focusing on motion and speed. That same thing that I just showed you right now, each one of those scenes probably took the same amount or less tokens than what the videos that I created. That's the difference between right now what China is doing with their models versus what the US is doing. US wants to build gigantic data centers and put every piece of data ever into it. Well, that's great in theory, but anybody who's watched Westworld knows how that worked out. Whereas other companies are trying to figure out how to make it smaller. Like in my world, I'll give you a perfect example. Can you imagine how different our legal system would be in this country if every person had access to the same legal expertise as a Fortune 500 company in your pocket as an app? It would reset our justice system. I say this because these are the type of things that you can do with this and what I think the next generation will do. But we have a lot of things that we've got to talk about. We have a lot of topics that we have to engage on. And I did promise one slide with a whole bunch of cheaper stuff. So if you all want to take pictures of this. By the way, anybody that registered, I will be sending out this PowerPoint deck as a PDF. So you'll be able to access it and use it and do whatever you need to. Please steal it, whatever you need to do, whatever it takes to educate people. Because the more and more I'm finding out, people just don't know. And once you expose people to these concepts and talk about them like real people, it's not hard to understand. You don't need a college degree to understand AI and the topical issues of it. You just don't. And to be honest, we're looking at JP Morgan, even in my company, we're looking at tech hires, things like zip code. We're looking at kids to come in for certifications and things like that. We're looking more about potential and your adaptability than we are so much about what you've learned. Because the more you learn, the more you have to unlearn sometimes too. And this whole AI thing, this next generation is AI native. They don't have to relearn how to do things with AI. They're learning it as they're developing. Where we're going to be in 10 years could be incredible. And again, please provide feedback on today's session. I know I went a little bit over, but I wanted to make sure I got through everything on my presentation. And again, we have these future AI workshops coming up. We're going to try to make them hybrid so that people don't have to show up in person for them in the future. Sorry. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions, talk to people afterwards, whatever you guys need to. But thank you.
What learning resources are available for adults at this time?
So one thing that I mentioned is, so you see, if you click on here and you connect with me on LinkedIn, I can give you access to Grow with Google. That's one of the resources that the state's doing. So there's a bunch of AI certifications that you can do. Just give me your email address and I'll give you free access to that. We have 500 free licenses. I've only used like 7. So anybody who would like it, you're welcome to. Just send me what email address you want to use and you'll get an invitation for it. And we're working to make more stuff available. Again, I'm trying to sell the state on don't sign deals with individual vendors. Sign 3 to 6 month contracts that you can extend, because you don't know when you're going to be paying a lot of money for a piece of crap because someone made the wrong change in their data model. Also, I want to make sure it's on-prem and that Google can't read data about our kids. I want teachers to be able to use it to provide better IEPs, but I want child's data completely a black box in there so nobody can see it. Once they prove that to me, great. But until then, we really need to be taking a very cautious role in how we roll this out. There's a lot of potential for it, but there's also a lot of potential for harm if you do it too quickly. Okay? Any other questions?
So you said in regards to like the certifications and stuff, that's something we can reach out to you?
Yeah, just send me an email. It's something that I'm doing. It's a pilot program we're doing with the AI Commission. But we've been given 500 free licenses. So my only thing is if I give you access, take at least one class and tell me if it sucks. Because again, we don't want to be signing up, to pay tax dollars for this if it's not going to be valuable, if it's not going to be accessible. If you guys tell me, oh my God, this is so boring, I'm not learning anything. No, and I'm going to give that feedback to Google, to Coursera to create better training curriculum. Or, part of it is maybe having more workshops like this, recording them, and then creating bite-sized videos and making them available. We're looking at doing that on the library website going forward. Potentially breaking up things that I talked about today into little individual scenes where we can talk about just the video or just Project Genie. The more you get exposed to it, the better. There's another, I'll go ahead and just give you some cheat codes. A really great podcast is called Last Week in AI. It is a weekly podcast. It is nerdy and wonky as hell, okay? They get deep because it's 3 guys from an AI startup. But they don't just cover features. They cover business changes, like when stocks go up, stocks go down, companies get bought, companies that are supposed to get bought that don't for obvious reasons. It helps give you a full picture. Most of the time I break it up and listen to it because they're like an hour long in like intervals. But the cool thing is on Apple Podcasts, you can jump to it. So if you don't care about the really nerdy hardware stuff or about chips, you can jump to the next session and just learn about the business and finance if you want. But it's the best podcast. So rather than having to create an AI agent that goes and scrapes the latest news and gives me a summary every day, I let the experts who are actually doing this every day, because I have a day job too. So, but that's one thing that I highly recommend for that. If you're looking for one app to try, again, if you use Gmail and you're, one of the people born in the late 1900s like me, you probably have a lot of data on your Gmail. All of a sudden, Gemini becomes really powerful. It's really nice to be able to ask Gemini a question about an email instead of searching and having to go find it. Show me this attachment that somebody sent me last year. So show me all the emails from blah, blah, blah. And Gemini can do that for you, even on the basic pro version and things like that. But the one thing that I would say, if you're not a Google person, try Perplexity. Because Perplexity gives you access to 7 different models in one app. And they're also creating their own internal lean models. So they create models just for searching. They'll create models just for like reasoning problems. And then they'll create ones just for helping people with code. It's really nice because I like it because I can do a prompt and then click on the little retry button and it lets me pick which model. And I can just click Grok or ChatGPT or Claude and it will rerun it. So you can see, because sometimes I'll use Gemini and I'll be like, what are you doing, dude? You're drunk today. No. And then I'll go over to Perplexity and I'll get it on the first try. Sometimes I'll go to ChatGPT and get it on the first try. But again, I'm just using the free versions that are available on my phone for that. Use them and you'll find your own style. And then what you can do is if you decide to pay for one, you can personalize it. Like I have mine that says, here's my LinkedIn page, here's all my information. So when I tell you to create a bio, use this information and nothing else. And then it stores that as like a personal memory on my account. So when I do things in the future, like I say, I'm a big proponent of higher education. I'm a big proponent of CTE and technology skills and things like that. I put all those things in so that when I ask it to like write a Facebook post or I want it to create a flyer for a workshop I'm doing, I get the right response in 1 or 2 tries versus having to do 3, 4, 5 times. Because if I've had to do it 5 times, I would have just gone in and created something myself in Microsoft Publisher or whatever else at that point. But again, this is where, and it helps kids to use this because you're forcing your kids to use words to describe what they want. And when they don't have the right words, they're going to be forced to expand their vocabulary. And that is something that I think is missing in the classroom, is actually helping the kids improve their individual vocabulary. Now if we could get a on-prem version of like Perplexity or Google Gemini for our kids, so that they can ask questions to contribute to stuff while they're in class, but we make it so we turn off image and video generation while they're in class, you can do things like that. You just have to say it's important to you, and that's what you want your tax dollars to be spent on. Not to get on my soapbox, but I'm a big proponent on it. And one of the things, we need to take care of our STEM teachers, because unlike CTE, the guys doing math, science, they don't get all the extra funding that the CTE teachers do. And I think it is completely silly that we fund accounting, but not accounting math. That we fund engineering and not calculus. That we fund engineering and not physics. These are all things, and the more you expose kids to science at younger ages, the more it's likely to actually interest them, spark their, and maybe do something different with their life, versus putting these kids in for standardized tests that nobody other than the state of Delaware cares about. And I say that as somebody who had, when I was in school, had the actual state testing for Maryland moved 2 weeks because I had chickenpox. You can't tell me a system that allows that to happen is benefiting the kids. So again, I would rather my kids spend an hour on AI than an hour on test prep. Because at least they're being creative, they're learning, they're coming up with definitions. Whatever you want to learn about, you can. And you're literally giving them an infinite toolbox. And I promise I'll shut up now. Sorry. As you can tell, it's something I'm very passionate about. This workshop was my idea because I wanted to be able to interface. So please give me feedback on what you liked about this, because we're looking at doing more sessions in the fall. If you want me to spend an entire session on flow, I can do that. If you don't want to hear me talk and you want to hear a creative person talk, say that. Because we'll lean on my network and we'll find people to come in and teach you guys this stuff.
So I'm definitely interested in doing more of these sessions. I can't make it all the way to like Lewes, Delaware. For, like,
Well, we're going to try and make them hybrid so you can dial in via Zoom.
oh, okay.
We couldn't get it. I'm limited. A lot of times this is the first time I'm coming to these facilities. So, you know, DTI has been nice enough to give us support for today, recording everything. But I'm hoping in the future it's eventually going to be hybrid so that you don't have to be in person. Because again, it's a haul for me too, because I live up here. So, but I don't think that Sussex would miss out just because I happen to live in Newark. So I'm just not going to do that in June or July when it's beach traffic.
What resources would you need to do that?
To do what?
Realize that someone can see another miles away.
The way we'll do is we'll just create a Zoom invite, and the application Zoom, you can dial in. So you'll register, and then you'll get an email with a Zoom number and passcode and a little URL, and then you can just log in from your phone or wherever you are. It's how I do all of my conferencing at work. Like some people use Microsoft Teams. I've been using Zoom since the pandemic. But it'll allow everybody, that anyone who registers on the library's website to be able to dial in and see that. And we're going to record, and we've recorded these sessions, and we are going to put them on the library's YouTube feed too. I'm sorry? All you need is a cell phone. You can download it, or if you have a laptop or a desktop, it's anything that has a web browser, you can use it. Because again, you're viewing a video, so as long as you can connect to the internet and view a video, you can connect with Zoom.
The last thing I was going to say, I don't want to take any time from anyone else, is keep in mind, I'm sure you already know that like Zoom, sometimes it has like a time limit, so it will shut off afterwards.
Zoom has a time limit if you have the free version.
Yes.
Zoom does not have a time limit if you have a paid version like I do,
Oh,
and DTI does. That's how you automatically know if someone's using the free version of Zoom, is if it has a 30-minute or 45-minute timer. Most of them will not have timers at all. Like I can do a literal 12-hour Zoom and my Zoom will not end. But I have an encrypted JP Morgan thing of Zoom. Not that anybody, and again, Zoom's great for that. Microsoft Teams is great too, except when you're like DTI has their version of Teams, JP Morgan has their version of Teams. I have to log out of everything on my desktop in order to be able to access and get on the said Teams meeting. They have to do the same thing if I sent them something from Teams. Because again, it's organizational, locked, like it's ring fenced for an organization. Good?
I had a question about the data centers. How would you, or if you're able to describe the equivalent for the amount of usage, like the water energy uses, like per token, like is it?
It's hard. Every model's different. I mean, you can guess, but here's the problem. If we had laws saying they had to actually show that and provide evidence of performance versus energy consumption, we would know. But right now, we have to take them at their word for it. That's why, to be honest, that's a big reason why you saw OpenAI switch, or Apple switch from OpenAI to Gemini for all their stuff, was because Google went and got smaller while everybody else tried to get bigger. And again, now, I have to say this, because now you got to make me say it. The following opinions do not reflect the opinions of JP Morgan Chase's clients, JP Morgan's affiliates, or anybody whatsoever affiliated with JP Morgan Chase or the state of Delaware. That said, I think you can get away with half the size of the data centers here. 1.2 gigawatts is more than the entire state of Delaware consumes in a year, times 3. We currently import 90% of our power. I want to see a small modular nuclear reactor before I see a data center. Because pound for pound, and in terms of zero emissions, it's the best and the least risky. But it's not totally proven in America yet. Wind is great. Again, if we had wind farms, that wouldn't be so. But anybody that wants to put 516 diesel generators in my backyard can go to hell. There's stuff in Tennessee, all over the country, of people being choked by the noise, by the fumes, their water tables drying up.
So I know there's one right now in Prince George's County, like the DMV area. They're fighting because they're trying to put a massive data center in their community right now. So like, I'm just watching that, I think a community conference, I think sometime this week, residents kind of voicing their complaints about it. And one way or another, they're still not trying to confirm or deny if that's something they want to implement.
Well, and you get into some really interesting territory here, because here's the thing. I'm going to say something that's kind of, not a lot of people know, but it's because I work in the bank and finance industry, I understand this, okay? You notice what these companies aren't doing? Applying for banks for loans for giant infrastructure projects. Why aren't they doing that? Why aren't the banks throwing money at data centers? Because 70% of them get canceled. Because you need, when you are spending billions of dollars every single month, you need something that looks like revenue. A lot of the revenue in big tech is based on future profits, not on actual current profits. The way that they're allowed to value their revenue, profit can be optional, depending on how you make the math work. And again, I'm not going to get into the ethics of that. I think we all know that, but it's legal. You can change these things to make it so that companies can't do this. But since 2008, profit became optional. And when you don't show profit, you can apply for government bonds. And you can get government bonds for things that are significantly more expensive than commercial loans. But you need state governments and national governments to sign off on them, willing politicians, and more importantly, a willing Federal Reserve chair. If he doesn't approve the bonds, they don't get their data centers, they can't claim their revenue, they all start posting losses. It becomes a big domino effect. You heard last week OpenAI announced that they're projecting a $14 billion loss. That's the high end of what people were projecting that to be. So that means their probably actual loss is probably 2 to 3 times that. Now, if they don't get a bond, they'll be bankrupt by the middle of next year.
So what do you think they're thinking? Like how Amazon kind of made it so their product is you can't live without it, and then everybody's kind of locked in, and then they can start charging whatever they want for it, or what do you think the ultimate?
Well, and this is, again, this is why big tech spends so much money on local political races and things like that, because really what it comes down to is getting exemptions at the county level, getting exemptions at the state level, and like Delaware. The one thing that I'll say this, you can say whatever you want about Delaware, and we've had Democrats in office for X number of years. We have one of the best bond ratings in the country. And the big thing preventing data centers from blowing up in Delaware is that bond rating, because none of those senators want to risk that bond rating for something that's just going to be used to puff up someone's balance sheet. And again, like I said, we have companies right over at the Star campus in Newark. There's a company, Nemours, that is working on liquid cooling technology for data center processors. They are close. And if they do this, they will cut the heat output by 40%. That will make the need to have a giant infrastructure project like that. I don't want to say it will make it way too expensive to continue, because then all of a sudden everybody looks at University of Delaware just erects a new building, throws their data center in that, and then they have a mini scale 200 megawatt data center right there. There's a in the Star Tower at University of Delaware, there's currently a data center on 1 floor. You want to know how much that costs in energy right now per year for 2 floors? $2 million a year from Bloom. Now that's zero emissions. When you start to do the math, diesel gets even more expensive, because you need 200 barrels of oil to keep one of those generators running every day. So you start to look, like people like to talk about natural gas and oil's cheap. No, not really. Not when you add how much you got to pay to refill that tanker every week. And then when you add in all of the health reasons and everything, it becomes very unaffordable very quickly. I think data centers are a good part Delaware's future. But 1.2 gigawatts is too damn big. China's not building over 500 megawatts anymore. I mean, they're even going so far as to build data centers and then sink them on the seafloor so they don't have to worry about cooling. Well, and one of the things here, like if we ever get our hydrogen industry off the ground here, you could power that entire data center off hydrogen fuel cells. The only thing is you need a source to generate the hydrogen. We have a nuclear plant right across the river that we can actually use, and so they could spin up, turn on the third stack there, and all the excess energy that's not getting used gets converted into hydrogen batteries that go right to the data centers. Meanwhile, your bill goes down. That's the way the energy should work for data centers. You create innovation, you create new economies, you create new industries, not replacing a whole bunch or telling people you're going to replace them, and then when they find out you're not, leaving companies and people double screwed. A lot of people that have had mass layoffs this year are not because of AI, because their companies aren't making profit anymore, and they're blaming AI. And the other aspect is that a lot of these companies are doing it based off promises from vendors that will never come true. The only thing true about AI is the price you pay for AI tomorrow will be cheaper than it is today. And that's literally the only truth that I've come that's stuck in my, and I've been doing this now for, really focused on AI for the past 3-4 years. We have a lot of discussions to have, and I think Delaware is going the right direction because they're at least entertaining the conversations, which some states are not even letting it be discussed. So I think we're in a good place. I think there's an innovation economy to be had here, but it starts with empowering people in the schools. It starts with empowering your teachers. It starts with giving your kids access to tools that the private school kids only get access to, things like that. And the way you do that is you say, hey, Mr. Senator, Mr. Representative, spend my money on this instead of that. And again, and part of the reason I've come to these things is because I'm discussing these with groups, policyholders in education, policyholders in healthcare, people that work in DTI. All this stuff is important, and these are conversations that need to keep having. And if someone tells you they don't want to talk about it, it's probably because they either know about it and know you're right, or they just don't know and they don't want to be caught not knowing. A lot of people just repeat what's told to them in vendor because they just skim emails. Based on the feedback that I got from my last session, I added all that stuff about tokens in after. I had this presentation already done. It was going to be, but I wanted to talk about that because I was worried someone was going to raise their hand and say, do you think it's a good use of water and resources to be playing with this stuff? That's a loaded question, but that's why I addressed it right off, because yes, but we're in a development stage here. Nobody knows what this stuff's going to be used for. Nobody knows who's going to be the ideal user yet. They're just building stuff and hoping it adds value. There has to be a feedback cycle there. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.